My daughter asked me yesterday why I changed the locks on the house. I told her the old ones were broken. They weren't broken. I changed them because 2 weeks ago I watched a man walk into my gym at 3:15 in the afternoon, use the lat pull-down machine for 40 minutes, towel off, refill his water bottle at the fountain, wave to me on his way out, and I felt the bones in my hand shift position when he touched my palm to return a borrowed pen. Not crack. Not pop. Shift. Like the bones in my fingers rearranged themselves into a configuration that wasn't quite right, and then slowly, over the course of about 10 seconds, drifted back. Let me explain. I'm the general manager of a 24-hour gym called Pinnacle Fitness in Dayton, Ohio. It's a franchise, one of about 60 locations across the Midwest. Not a luxury place. Not a dump. Somewhere in the middle, clean rubber floors, decent equipment, a smoothie bar near the entrance that closes at 8 p.m. We have about 2,200 active members. I know maybe 300 of them by name. That's my job. I'm there 5 days a week, usually 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., sometimes later if there's a maintenance issue or a staffing gap. I've been running this location for 4 years. When people hear 24-hour gym, they usually assume someone is always on site. That's not how it works. The staffed hours are 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. After 10, the front desk closes, the smoothie bar is already dark, and the facility runs on access card entry only. Members badge in at the front door, work out, badge out. Cameras cover every angle. If something happens, a medical emergency, a break-in, someone propping the door for a non-member, the monitoring company calls me or the assistant manager, and if it's serious enough, they call the police. Between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., the gym is unstaffed but not unsupervised. It's a distinction we make very clear in the member agreement. You're welcome to work out whenever you want. But you're on camera, you're bound by the code of conduct, and if you do anything that trips the monitoring system, there will be consequences. Most of our overnight traffic is exactly what you'd expect. Nurses and factory workers hitting the treadmill after a late shift. College kids who claim they do their best lifting at 1 a.m. A handful of insomniacs who'd rather push weight than stare at the ceiling. The overnight crowd is small, reliable, and almost entirely self-policing. In 4 years, the most serious overnight incident I've dealt with was a guy who fell asleep on a yoga mat and set off the motion alarm when he rolled over at 4 a.m. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand, there was nothing about this gym, this job, or this member population that prepared me for what started happening in March. March 9th. A Monday. I arrived at 10:15 a.m., a little late because of a dentist appointment. The morning staff, Casey at the front desk, Romy handling the smoothie bar setup, and Eric our maintenance tech, were already in place. Normal morning. Maybe 40 members on the floor. The parking lot was a third full. Music was playing on the overhead speakers, some curated workout playlist that corporate sends us monthly and that everyone tolerates but no one likes. Casey flagged me as I came in. Hey, the 4 a.m. camera dump has a weird one. Every morning, the monitoring company sends us a digest of the previous night's camera activity, a time-stamped summary of entries, exits, and any flagged motion events. It's almost always routine. Casey reviewed it as part of her opening checklist. Weird how. There's an entry at 2:47 a.m. but no matching exit. This happens occasionally. Someone badges in, works out for a few hours, and is still inside when the digest is compiled at 4 a.m. They leave later, and the exit shows up in the next cycle. Not unusual. Probably still here when the dump ran, I said. That's what I thought. But I checked the 6 a.m. dump too. Still no exit. That was slightly more unusual. It meant someone had been in the gym for over 3 hours in the middle of the night. Not impossible, we have a few marathon trainers, but worth a look. Casey pulled up the entry log on the front desk terminal. Member badge in at 2:47 a.m. The name on the account was Philip Kern. I didn't recognize it, which wasn't unusual for an overnight member. I pulled up his profile. He'd signed up 11 months ago. Standard membership. His photo was on file. Every member takes one at enrollment. White male, mid-40s, thinning brown hair, neutral expression. Nothing remarkable. I told Casey I'd review the camera footage when I had a chance. She nodded and moved on to the rest of her checklist. I didn't review it that day. I got pulled into a plumbing issue in the men's locker room that ate my entire afternoon. By the time I locked my office at 7 p.m., I'd forgotten about Philip Kern entirely. March 11th, Wednesday. Casey flagged me again. Same guy. 2:47 a.m. entry. No exit in either dump. Same time. Exactly the same time. 2:47 a.m. I sat down at the terminal and pulled the entry logs for the past week. Philip Kern had badged in at 2:47 a.m. on March 2nd, March 4th, March 6th, March 9th, and March 11th. 5 entries across 9 days, every other day, at the exact same minute. Not one of them had a corresponding exit. He's got to be using the emergency door, I said. The rear emergency exit opened from the inside without a badge, fire code required it. There was a camera on it, but exits through that door didn't generate an access log entry the way the front door did. Members occasionally used it if they were parked in the back lot. I checked the rear camera, Casey said. I went through all 5 nights. He doesn't come out the back. I looked at her. She was being careful with her expression, keeping it neutral, the way you do when you've noticed something you're not sure you should be worried about. So where does he go? That's the thing. I pulled the interior footage for last night. He comes in at 2:47. He goes to the free weight area. He works out for about an hour, normal stuff, dumbbell presses, some cable work. Then at 3:50 he puts the weights back, wipes down the bench, walks toward the locker room, and that's it. He leaves through the locker room emergency exit. There was one, though it was alarmed and would have triggered a monitoring alert. No alarm triggered. And I checked that camera too. He walks into the locker room. He doesn't come out. He has to come out. He doesn't. I watched the locker room entrance camera for the entire remaining night. From 3:50 a.m. until the morning crew opened at 4:45. Nobody comes out of that locker room. And when Eric went in to do his morning check at 5, it was empty. I want to pause here and talk about the feeling. Not fear, not yet. What I felt was administrative friction. A piece of data that didn't fit. A member who enters and doesn't exit, night after night, at a time when the facility is empty and the cameras should account for every square foot of movement. It felt like a software glitch or a camera blind spot we hadn't identified. It felt solvable. I told Casey I'd handle it. That afternoon I did a full physical walkthrough of the locker room with Eric. Men's side. It's not large, maybe 600 square feet. A row of lockers along 2 walls. 3 toilet stalls. 3 shower stalls with curtains. A bench. A mirror. 1 entrance, 1 emergency exit. The emergency exit was closed, locked from the outside, alarmed. No windows. No ceiling panels large enough for a person to access. No other way in or out. I checked every locker. All empty or containing members' belongings, protein powder, flip-flops, deodorant. Nothing unusual. Eric checked the plumbing access panels behind the showers. Sealed tight. If someone's hiding in here overnight, where are they hiding? I asked. Eric shrugged. They're not. Camera's probably got a dead frame or a lag. I'll run diagnostics. He ran diagnostics. The cameras were functioning normally. No dead frames, no lag, no recording gaps. The footage showed exactly what Casey described: Philip Kern walking into the locker room at 3:50 a.m. and not coming out. March 13th, Friday. I stayed late. I told my wife I had inventory to finish, which was half true. What I actually did was sit in my office with the live camera feeds on my monitor and wait. At 10 p.m., the last staffed hours member left. The desk closed. The facility went to access card-only mode. The overhead lights dimmed to their overnight setting, not dark, but reduced, giving the whole place a slightly underwater look. 11 p.m. Nothing. Midnight. 2 members came in, both regulars I recognized from the overnight logs. A woman in her 20s who went straight to the treadmills. A heavy-set man who headed for the squat rack. Both badged in properly. Both had corresponding exit timestamps when they left, the woman at 12:40, the men at 1:15. 1:30 a.m. Empty. 2 a.m. Empty. 2:30 a.m. I was tired. I'd been at the gym for over 16 hours. The coffee from the smoothie bar was cold and I'd stopped tasting it 2 cups ago. The camera feeds showed nothing. Empty floor, empty entrance, empty locker room. 2:47 a.m. The front door opened. I watched the entrance camera. A man walked in, thinning brown hair, mid-40s, wearing a gray t-shirt and black athletic shorts. He held his access card to the reader. The system logged the entry. Philip Kern. He walked through the lobby without looking around. Straight to the free weight area. He picked up a pair of 40-pound dumbbells from the rack and sat on a bench. I watched him work out. He was completely normal. His form was decent. He rested between sets. He adjusted the bench angle at one point. He grabbed a heavier pair of dumbbells for his second exercise. He drank from a water bottle he'd brought with him. At one point he wiped his forehead with the hem of his shirt and I could see his stomach, soft, pale, middle-aged. Normal. I watched for an hour. Nothing about him was wrong. Nothing about his behavior was unusual. He was just a man working out in the middle of the night, exactly like hundreds of other members who'd done the same thing in this gym over the past 4 years. At 3:48 a.m., he re-racked his weights. He wiped down the bench with the sanitizer spray we keep at every station. He picked up his water bottle and walked toward the locker room. I switched to the locker room entrance camera. He walked through the doorway. I switched to the interior locker room camera, the one that covers the main area between the lockers and the showers. He appeared in frame, walking toward the showers. He pulled back the curtain of the second shower stall. He stepped inside. The curtain swung closed behind him. I stared at the monitor. The shower stall curtain hung motionless. I could see the bottom of it. The gap between the curtain's hem and the tile floor was about 8 inches. In that gap, I should have been able to see his feet. His shoes. Something. The gap was empty. I zoomed in. The camera resolution was good enough that I could see the grout lines between the tiles. There was nothing behind that curtain. No feet, no shadow, no indication that anyone was standing in the stall. I got up from my desk. This is the part I've replayed in my head more times than I can count, because what I should have done was call the monitoring company. Or the police. Or at minimum, I should have called Eric or Casey to come back to the gym so I wasn't alone at 3:50 in the morning with a man who walks into shower stalls and disappears. What I did instead was walk out of my office, across the gym floor, and into the men's locker room. It was quiet. The reduced lighting made the tile look gray. The air was warm and slightly humid. The climate system keeps the locker rooms a few degrees above the main floor. I could hear the low hum of the ventilation. Nothing else. I walked to the second shower stall. The curtain was closed. I pulled it back. Empty. Dry tile. A drain in the center. The shower head mounted on the wall, a faint mineral deposit around its rim. Nothing else. I checked every stall. Every toilet. Every locker. I stood in the center of the room and turned in a slow circle and confirmed what I already knew. I was alone. Philip Kern was gone, the same way he'd been gone every other night, through an exit that didn't exist in a room with no way out. I drove home that night with the windows down because the cold air kept me from drifting into the kind of thinking that doesn't lead anywhere productive. I told myself there was a rational explanation. A maintenance hitch I'd missed. A camera angle that created a visual dead zone. Something. I didn't sleep well. At some point in the early morning I dreamed I was standing in the shower stall, the second one, and the curtain was closed around me and I couldn't find the edge of it. I kept pushing at the fabric and it kept going, like there was more of it than there should be, like the curtain was larger on the inside than the outside, and the air was getting warmer and I couldn't find the opening and I could feel the tiles under my feet softening, becoming less solid, and I woke up at 6:20 a.m. with my wife's hand on my shoulder. "You were grinding your teeth," she said. Really loud. My jaw ached for the rest of the day. March 16th, Monday again. I made a decision. I was going to talk to Philip Kern. Not at 2:47 a.m. During the day. I pulled his profile again and looked at the phone number on file. I could have called him, but that felt wrong, too official, too confrontational. I wanted to see him. I wanted to talk to him in the daylight, in a normal context, and confirm for myself that he was just a person with an unusual workout schedule and that everything else had a boring explanation. I wrote down his recent entry times and cross-referenced them with the access logs to see if he ever came during staffed hours. He did. Not often, but the logs showed occasional daytime visits, Saturday mornings, mostly, and a handful of weekday afternoons. I checked the most recent one, March 14th, Saturday, 11:22 a.m. entry, 12:45 p.m. exit. Normal duration. Clean exit timestamp. I decided to wait for his next daytime visit. March 18th, Wednesday. 3:12 p.m. I was in my office answering emails when Casey called the desk phone. Philip Kern just badged in. I stood up. I checked my reflection in the dark monitor screen, which was a strange impulse. I wasn't going on a date, I was going to make small talk with a gym member. But I wanted to look normal. Approachable. Not like a manager who'd spent a week watching this man on camera at 3 in the morning. I walked out onto the gym floor. Afternoon crowd, moderately busy, maybe 50 people spread across the equipment. Pop music on the speakers. Daylight coming through the front windows. The most ordinary environment imaginable. Philip Kern was at the lat pull-down machine. Cable station in the back corner. He was doing smooth, controlled reps with what looked like about 120 pounds. His form was good. He was wearing a blue t-shirt and gray shorts. He looked exactly like his enrollment photo, mid-40s, thinning hair, average build, average face. The kind of person you'd see at a hardware store on a Saturday and never think about again. I walked over. Waited for him to finish his set. "Hey," I said. "I'm Marcus, the GM here. Just wanted to check in, how's everything going with your membership?" He let the weight stack settle and looked at me. His expression was pleasant. Normal. Mildly surprised to be approached, the way anyone would be. "Going great," he said. "I like this location. Quieter than the one I used to go to in Columbus." His voice was unremarkable. Midwestern flat. He spoke at a normal volume and maintained normal eye contact. "Glad to hear it. You been hitting the overnight hours much? I noticed you're one of our late-night regulars." A small laugh. "Yeah, I work weird hours. Software contracting, I'm up late most nights anyway, so I figure I might as well put the time to use." "Makes sense. Everything working okay with the after-hours access? Card reader giving you any trouble?" "Nope, no problems." We talked for another minute or two. Normal, forgettable conversation. He asked if we were ever going to get another cable crossover machine because the one we had was always occupied during peak hours. I said I'd put in a request. He thanked me and went back to his set. I stood there for a moment, watching him pull the bar down. Smooth motion. Cable whirring. Weight stack rising and falling. Normal. Completely, unremarkably normal. I turned to leave and he said, "Oh, hey, do you have a pen? I need to write down my new work schedule so I remember to update my availability with you guys." He didn't need to update anything with us. We don't track member availability. But the request was so mundane that I didn't think about it. I pulled a pen from my pocket, a cheap ballpoint with the Pinnacle Fitness logo, and handed it to him. His fingers touched mine. And the bones in my hand moved. Not like cracking your knuckles. Not like a joint popping. The bones inside my hand, the metacarpals, the phalanges, the small dense bones of the wrist, shifted laterally inside my flesh. I felt them slide, resettle, and then slowly, like something finding its way back through a maze, return to their original positions. The whole process took about 10 seconds. It didn't hurt. It felt like my hand was being gently rearranged from the inside by something that was curious about the way it was built. I looked at my hand. It looked normal. I flexed my fingers. They worked. But for those 10 seconds, I had felt, with absolute clarity, that the internal architecture of my hand had been briefly disassembled and reassembled by the contact of this man's fingertips. Philip Kern wrote something on a scrap of paper from his pocket, handed the pen back, and said, "Thanks." I took the pen. The second contact produced nothing. My hand felt normal. He went back to his workout. I went back to my office and sat in my chair and looked at my hand for a very long time. I didn't tell Casey. I didn't tell Eric. How would I even describe it? A member touched my hand and my bones rearranged. It sounded psychosomatic. It sounded like I'd been sleeping badly and watching too much camera footage, and my brain had manufactured a sensation to match the anxiety I'd been building for a week. That's what I told myself. But that night, lying in bed at 11 p.m., I felt it again. Not in my hand. In my left foot. I was on my back, eyes closed, halfway to sleep, when the bones in my foot shifted. The same lateral slide, the same slow resettling. As if something was mapping the structure, testing the connections, and then putting everything back. It lasted about 15 seconds. My foot looked the same. It worked the same. But I had felt it. I had felt the bones move under my skin like keys on a ring being sorted by an unseen hand. I sat up in bed and turned on the lamp and pressed my fingers into the top of my foot, feeling for anything out of place. Everything was where it should be. My wife mumbled and rolled over. I turned the light off and lay in the dark and tried to convince myself it was a muscle spasm. March 19th, Thursday. I went to the gym early and pulled the overnight footage from the night before. Philip Kern. 2:47 a.m. Same as always. Entered, worked out, walked to the locker room, stepped into the second shower stall, disappeared. But this time I noticed something I hadn't before. I went back through the footage frame by frame during his workout. I was looking for anything different, anything that might have changed since I'd spoken to him in person. And I found it, not in his behavior, but in his effect on the equipment. At 3:11 a.m., he was using the chest press machine. He completed a set, stood up, and moved to the next station. Normal. But when he stood up, the seat pad didn't decompress. Every gym seat is covered in vinyl over foam padding. When you sit on it, your weight compresses the foam. When you stand up, the foam rebounds, slowly, visibly, taking a second or two to puff back to its original shape. I'd seen it thousands of times. It's one of those unconscious details your eye registers without your brain processing it. Philip Kern stood up from the chest press and the seat stayed compressed. The exact imprint of his body remained in the padding as if he were still sitting there. I watched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. It didn't rebound. I scrubbed forward. At 3:23 a.m., another member came in, a regular named Daryl who worked night shifts at the right pat base. Daryl walked over to the chest press, sat down in the same seat, did his set, and stood up. The padding rebounded immediately. I went back to Philip Kern's portion and checked every machine he used. The lat pull-down. The cable station. The bench. Every single one, the padding stayed compressed after he used it and didn't rebound until someone else sat down. He was leaving an impression in the material that only another person's presence could erase. The bone shifting happened again that night. Both feet. Then my ankles. Then, around 3 a.m., and yes, I checked the time, and yes, I noticed the hour, my ribs. That one woke me up fully. It wasn't painful. But feeling your ribs shift inside your chest, feeling them spread and resettle like fingers interlacing in a new pattern, is a sensation so fundamentally wrong that your body floods with adrenaline even in the absence of pain. I sat on the edge of the bed with my hands on my ribcage and breathed in and out and felt the bones sliding gently, mapping themselves, learning themselves, and then returning to normal. My wife didn't wake up. I went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table until dawn. I saw my doctor the following Monday. I told her I'd been experiencing unusual sensations in my bones, a shifting feeling, like internal movement. She palpated my hands, my feet, my ribs. She ordered X-rays. The X-rays came back completely normal. No displacement, no fractures, no abnormalities. She suggested stress. She suggested magnesium supplements. She suggested that working long hours and sleeping poorly can produce somatic symptoms that feel very real but have no structural basis. I thanked her. I took the magnesium. The shifting continued every night. By March 27th, it had reached my spine. I became obsessed with Philip Kern. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, focused, managerial way. I pulled every piece of information our system had on him. His enrollment date, April 15, 2019. His payment method, Visa debit card ending in 4401. His emergency contact, none listed. His address, an apartment complex on Wilmington Avenue, about 6 miles from the gym. I drove past the address one afternoon. It was real. A plain, 2-story apartment building with exterior stairs and a shared parking lot. I didn't go in. I didn't even slow down much. I just needed to confirm that the place existed in physical space, that it wasn't a vacant lot or a made-up address. I wanted to run his name through public records, court records, property records, anything, but I stopped myself. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find. Because I realized I was afraid of finding nothing. That would be worse, somehow. A perfectly empty background behind a perfectly normal face. April 1st. The thing I haven't been able to explain to anyone. I was at the gym during normal hours. Afternoon. Maybe 2 o'clock. I was walking the floor doing my usual circuit, checking equipment, picking up stray towels, making sure the sanitizer stations were stocked. The gym was moderately full. 50, 60 people. Daylight through the windows. Everything ordinary. I walked past the bench press area and a woman I didn't recognize was doing incline presses. As I passed behind her, I felt a slight pull in my left shoulder. Not pain. A gravitational tug, as if the bones in my shoulder were leaning toward her. I kept walking. The sensation faded. I passed a man on the treadmill. Same pull, this time in my right knee. I kept walking. It faded. I passed a teenager doing bicep curls. Both wrists pulled. Faded. I stopped in the middle of the gym floor. I stood very still. Around me, people were working out, lifting, running, stretching. And I could feel my skeleton responding to each of them. Not dramatically. Subtly. A slight directional pull, a faint interior shifting, as if the bones in my body were orienting themselves toward the nearest human being like iron filings near a magnet. I turned in a slow circle. The pulse shifted with my orientation. When I faced the free weight area, I felt it in my hands. When I faced the cardio section, I felt it in my legs. My body was mapping the room through its bones, identifying the location and proximity of every person on the floor through some sense I had not possessed 3 weeks ago. I went to my office and closed the door and sat in the dark for 20 minutes. April 3rd. I stayed late again. Not to watch the cameras this time. To be on the floor. At 2:47 a.m., Philip Kern walked in. I was standing near the smoothie bar, partially concealed by the counter. He came through the front door, badged in, and walked straight to the free weight area. Same as always. Gray t-shirt. Black shorts. Water bottle. Unremarkable face. But this time I could feel him. Not hear him, not see him in my peripheral vision, feel him, through the bones in my body. A dense, directional pull, much stronger than what I'd felt with the daytime members. With them it had been subtle, magnetic. With Philip Kern it was structural. My skeleton was leaning toward him as if he were a center of gravity, and the lean wasn't generic, it was specific. Each bone in my body was pulling toward a corresponding location in his. My left femur toward his left femur. My right scapula toward his right scapula. Rib for rib. Vertebra for vertebra. And I understood, suddenly and completely, what the shifting had been. My bones hadn't been rearranging themselves. They'd been learning a new orientation. Being calibrated. Tuned to a frequency I shouldn't have been able to perceive. I was feeling his skeleton. I was feeling Philip Kern's skeleton from across the room, and what I felt was wrong. The pull was there, dense, strong, structurally precise. But there was something underneath it. A hollowness. Like pressing your ear to a wall and hearing not just the room beyond it but the absence of the room. The architecture was present but there was nothing living inside it. No warmth. No resonance. Just structure. Just bones, or something performing the function of bones, arranged in perfect human configuration without any of the biological reality that should have accompanied them. Philip Kern was built correctly. But he was empty. He worked out for an hour. I stayed behind the counter and felt every rep, every time he lifted a dumbbell, I felt the corresponding bones in my arms respond, a sympathetic flex, a shadow of the load, as if my body were mirroring his at a structural level. When he sat on the bench, I felt the compression in my pelvis. When he walked to the locker room, I felt the cadence of his steps in my own legs. He walked into the locker room. He pulled back the curtain of the second shower stall. He stepped inside. The pull vanished. Not faded. Vanished. One moment I was feeling every bone in his body with excruciating specificity. The next, nothing. As complete an absence as a light switching off. He hadn't left the building through a hidden exit. He hadn't become invisible to the cameras. He had simply stopped existing in a way that my new sense could detect. I walked into the locker room. I pulled back the shower curtain. Empty. I pressed my hand to the tile wall of the shower stall. It was warm. Not hot, not steam warm. Body warm. The exact temperature of living skin. I pressed my other hand to the adjacent stall's wall. Cold. Normal tile cold. I put both hands back on the warm wall. And I felt something. A pulse. Slow. Deep. Not coming through the wall so much as coming from inside the wall. A rhythmic throb in the tile and the grout and the substrate behind it, as if the building itself had developed a heartbeat in this one specific location and it was beating at a rate that I recognized because I could feel it in my own chest. It was my resting heart rate. 62 beats per minute. I'd had it checked at the doctor less than 2 weeks ago. The wall was beating in time with me. I pulled my hands away. The warmth faded. The pulse stopped. I stood in the locker room alone, in the dim overnight lighting, and I understood 3 things. 1. Philip Kern was not a person. He was a structure, a framework of something that looked and behaved like a human being but was missing every quality that distinguished living matter from architecture. He was built the way the gym was built. Functional. Load-bearing. Empty inside. 2. The shower stall was not where he disappeared. It was where he returned. He wasn't leaving the building through the stall. He was going back into it. Into the walls, the foundation, the bones of the structure itself. The gym was not a building that a strange man visited. The gym was where the strange man lived. The infrastructure was his body the same way my skeleton was mine. 3. When he touched my hand and I felt my bones shift, he wasn't studying me. He was installing something. The new sense I developed, the ability to feel the skeletal structure of every person in the building, that wasn't a side effect of contact. It was a function. He had given me the capacity to monitor the structural presence of every person who used this facility, the same way the building's own systems monitored temperature, humidity, electrical load. He was making me part of the building. I didn't quit that night. I should have. But I had Casey and Eric and Romy and 200 members who would come through those doors in the morning, and the thought that stopped me from walking out was this: if I could feel them, could the building feel them too? And if it could, if the walls had learned to sense human presence the way I now sensed it, what was it learning from them? What was it calibrating toward? The foam padding that didn't decompress after Philip Kern sat on it. The wall that beat with my heart rate. The shower stall that swallowed a man who wasn't a man. The building was practicing. The same way a gym member practices a movement, awkward at first, then smoother, then automatic. The building was practicing something, and Philip Kern was its form, its test repetition, its way of walking through the motions of being a human inside a human space. And now it had recruited me to feel the difference, to register whether the performance was convincing, the same way your nervous system tells you whether a movement was executed correctly. I was the building's proprioception. April 4th, Saturday. The day I changed the locks. I was at home. It was early afternoon. My daughter was at the kitchen table doing homework. My wife was in the living room reading. I was standing at the sink, washing a coffee mug, and I felt it. A pull. In my right hand. Slight, directional, familiar. I put the mug down. I stood very still. The pull was coming from my daughter. From her left hand, specifically, the one holding her pencil. I could feel the bones in her fingers, the slim metacarpals, the tiny phalanges, all perfectly arranged, all alive and warm and resonant with the biological hum that Philip Kern's structure so conspicuously lacked. I was feeling my daughter's skeleton. I was feeling it the way I felt members on the gym floor. Detailed. Specific. Structural. And then I felt something else. A faint echo. A secondary pull, much deeper, coming from beneath us. From under the floor. From the foundation of our house. Like something in the walls was learning to listen. I called a locksmith that afternoon. I don't know why I thought new locks would help. The thing I was afraid of wasn't coming through the doors. But I needed to do something with my hands, something that felt like fortification, something that gave me even the illusion of a barrier between my family and whatever was now using my body as a sensor array. The locksmith came. He changed the deadbolts, front and back. He handed me the new keys and shook my hand and left. His skeleton was healthy. I felt every bone in it during the handshake. It took everything I had not to pull away. I went back to the gym the next Monday. I'm still going. Every day. Because here's the thing I can't get past, the thing that keeps me in that building even though I now understand what it's becoming. If I leave, it'll need a new proprioceptive system. A new person to feel the room, to map the bodies, to provide feedback on the fidelity of whatever it's building toward. It'll choose someone else. Casey. Eric. Someone who doesn't know what's happening. So I stay. I walk the floor. I feel every member's skeleton as they move through their workouts, and I say nothing, and I smile, and I restock the sanitizer stations and I put in equipment requests and I lock my office at 7 p.m. and go home to a house where I can now feel my family's bones through the walls. Philip Kern still comes at 2:47 a.m. every other night. I've stopped watching the footage. I don't need to. I can feel him arrive from my bed, 6 miles away. A dense, hollow pull in the exact center of my chest, like a building breathing in. He's getting warmer. Each visit, the emptiness inside his structure is a little less empty. Whatever he's practicing, he's getting closer. And last Tuesday, this is the part that made me write this, the part one can't stop thinking about. I was lying in bed at 3:50 a.m., feeling the distant pull of Philip Kern arriving at the shower stall, feeling him step inside, feeling the building absorb him back into itself. The pull vanished, the way it always does. But this time, just before it disappeared, I felt something new. A second skeleton. Inside the building. Not Philip Kern, something else. Something that hadn't been there before. Faint, incomplete, more blueprint than body. Like the first draft of a human being, roughed in at the structural level but not yet filled with the 1,000 details that make a person real. It was in the wall behind the smoothie bar. Close to where I stand every day. And its bones were small. The size of a child's. I measured my daughter's hands that night while she slept. I held her fingers, gently, and felt the bones inside them, and then I reached out with the sense I never asked for and felt the hands of the thing in the wall. Same length. Same spacing. Same number of bones in exactly the same configuration. I changed the locks again the next morning. My wife thinks I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. But the locks aren't for what's outside. They're so I have something to do with my hands besides feel the walls of my own house learning the shape of my daughter's skeleton. The building is almost finished practicing. I don't know what happens when it's done.